Let's start at the beginning and let's talk about the number one. The number one is the number of humility and authenticity. It is the I, it is the one, it is the me, it is the self. This number is associated with the Dalai Lama, and nobody would say the Dalai Lama isn't incredibly powerful, but his power comes from his compassion. His power comes from his authenticity. His power comes from his innocence. He is an authentically sweet, sincere, open, vulnerable, present person. And there's like almost an innocence, a childlike innocence about him that is incredibly sincere. It's hard in Western culture to be that vulnerable, that sincere, that raw, because our culture sees that as weakness. We see that as, oh, they're vulnerable. Oh, they could be a victim. They are a victim of their circumstances. And yet there's a tremendous power in that innocence. And it's something that needs to be protected and honored, which is one of the reasons that I'm doing these videos. You'll hear that in multiple videos, is because I don't think we are respecting the innocent people of the world, the people who have done nothing wrong. They've done no harm. They are in the wrong place at the wrong time. They are a victim of circumstance. They are trying to better themselves as an individual, and they don't have the power, okay? Because if you add the 1 with a 0, you actually get a 10. And that 10 is about power. And so you've got people in power lording over the people that are the ones. People who are ones oftentimes are farmers, ranchers, cowboys, organic gardeners. They like to get into what is earthy, sincere, real, vulnerable. They nurture vulnerable things. I mean, you don't pull on a little stalk of a plant as it's growing. You're going to harm it. You let it be. You leave it alone. So I think that our culture right now, we just won't leave it alone. It's like, I'm going to power over this, and I'm going to make a rule, and da 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 da. And what has happened historically over and over and over again are that the people of power make decisions for the vulnerable, and they don't have the good intentions to protect those people. I mean, right now, the vulnerable are the elderly, the vulnerable are the disabled, the vulnerable are people coming from other countries where they were running for their lives. The vulnerable are, children. The vulnerable are our schools, the children in our schools. And it's a horrific thing to me at this particular time that we do not honor and respect the innocent and the vulnerable. Like, are you kidding me? That is the nature of compassion. That is the nature of the goodness that's in the world. Why would you want to harm children, making them afraid in their own schools? Like, why would you even do that? Because, that causes damage. It basically shatters innocence. It shatters the heart of compassion. It generates fear when we're in a world where we need so much compassion right now, and yet those that are in authority and those that are in power are beating down the innocent and taking advantage. And, it's like, well, I think it was, oh my gosh, who was it? Mark Twain said, that the great wealth of the world has been built on the backs of the poor, which is absolutely true. So the number one is the number of being a slave, and you can be a person in this lifetime, but you feel like you're a slave to your mate. You can feel like you're a slave to your children. You can feel vulnerable. You can feel victimized. You can feel put down. So whenever that number one comes in, you want to look around, like, is the universe telling me that I need to be more authentic, more vulnerable, more sincere, more compassionate, which is almost always the case? Or is it saying that I'm being victimized, that I am a slave to something more powerful, which you can be a slave to a belief. You can be a slave to an ideal. You can be a slave to a religion. You can be a slave to a government. You can be used for bad things by those in power because somebody made it the rule, right? So history is filled with stories that, well, it was the rule, it was the law. So that's what we did. And I'm like, but that's a terrible law. It causes harm, it causes suffering. And to me, it's like, it's so important right now that we understand and know that we need to protect the vulnerable. We need to protect the innocent. We need to protect the animals. We need to protect the oceans. There are so many things we need to protect, but it's very clear that nobody respects and honors the number one. They don't respect it. And even people say now, it's like, there's so much going on. There's so much chaos. I feel like I can't make a difference. I'm like, again, not honoring the number one, not honoring the individual, not honoring the voice. And trust me, I've written lots of letters to senators and congressmen and everything too. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have. And there's no response. Like, there is no response. Like, there's no caring, or not enough caring, I should say, about the innocent and the suffering that their decisions and choices are causing. And once again, I say this in another video, I would not want to be some of these people in the next life. Like, holy cow, like the karmic consequence of the choices and the decisions that they're making, and how they are going to negatively impact them for lifetimes. I mean, like, lifetimes is horrific to me. I mean, it's like, if you had a shred of conscience, you would not make those decisions and choices. And that's the problem. They aren't there. They aren't in that place of their own vulnerability. They have suppressed the number one. They've suppressed the vulnerability, and they've turned the one into, I'm going to get what I want no matter what. Well, that's not vulnerability. That is actually a power grab, right? So they've turned the one into a 10 again, and they're saying, I'm not going to be vulnerable, so I'm going to collect as much money as I can so I don't ever have to feel like you and feel that vulnerability. To me, it's an atrocity. And it is an atrocity waiting to happen. Situations like this collapse governments, collapse worlds, collapse economies, cause war, cause mayhem. And, I'm just one of these people that just says, there is a better way than war. There is a better way than egos fighting at the expense of the innocent. And who ends up suffering the most is the innocent. And, somehow we've got to create, I thought we had a culture that was protecting those that were deprived, those that were in need, those that deserve support, those that didn't have the same advantages, and to help them and to lift them up. I think a society is gauged the most historically on how it treats the innocent. And, every culture does this well, and every culture has done this badly. At the moment, we're doing it badly. So, it's this trick to kind of try and turn it around and get people to recognize that, when you harm the most innocent, that's when you lose power. I mean, because it's horrific. I mean, it causes so much pain that, eventually there's an eruption of something to force a change. And so, again, the number one is like, we need to own our own vulnerability. And so many times we're like, oh, well, I've got money, I don't care what's going on. I'm like, no, you need to care what's going on. And you need to find that vulnerability inside. You need to find that compassion on the inside that wants to help, that wants to touch, that wants to make a difference. You have to make an effort. And it's an effort to say, oh, well, I don't want to go back into my car and get my bags for groceries because I'll just use the plastic bag. Everybody else is using the plastic bag. I've been using them forever. Da, 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 da. Well, it's inconvenient for you to go back to the car. It's a vulnerable thing to go back to the car to get that. It's inconvenient. But how inconvenient is it when a turtle is suffocating on plastic? Is that inconvenient? It's inconvenient. It absolutely is inconvenient. So we're in this place right now that we have to choose to be uncomfortable and vulnerable and humble and authentic and sincere and follow through, because people are hurting. Life is hurting. The planet is hurting. The whales are hurting. The dolphins are hurting. There's so much hurting right now that, you know what? You should be uncomfortable. You actually should be uncomfortable. And if that triggers that vulnerability in you to act and to do something, then you have fully embodied the lesson of the number one from the healthiest place, not from the me place, but from the I want to make a difference in the world place. And that we all need to do that and come together. Otherwise, we're going to break the heart of the world. And I would rather break my heart open in sincerity and love and caring for humanity than to break the heart of the planet. And so it's important that we reclaim our own innocence. Because the children are suffering, the weak are suffering, the elderly are suffering. There are so many that are suffering, and we can't use GoFundMe to fund everything. I mean, and you can't do it. I mean, it's like we've got to come together and have help. As an individual, we just literally can't do it. You can get completely overwhelmed in that vulnerability, and it hurts and it scares people and they shut down. And there's a really good reason you shut down, because vulnerability is raw. I mean, it's really, really raw. I remember when my husband was working in India, and it's just horrific to see the people on the streets that are suffering and living on the medians of the highways, and the children that are starving and the people that are starving. It's horrific. And, what happens is that, people just tune it out because there's so much of it, and they are unwilling to open their hearts to that vulnerability, because if you were, you would be doing something about it. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really amazing people in India that are, helping the homeless, and, there are, but there's so much that needs to be done. And that's why I'm doing these videos, is because right now there's so much that needs to be done, that each of these numbers you need to embody and you need to integrate, even if they are not part of your numerological pattern. That you need to integrate humility and humbleness, and you need to open your heart, and you need to learn structures and strategies, the number 7, and you need to claim your power and move it forward consciously, safely, and constructively. That I'm challenging everybody to integrate all of them. Yes, learn about your personal matrix for sure. Notice what numbers you're drawn to for sure, but you need to notice what numbers are happening around you also, because we're in a time of the most powerful lessons of consciousness and integration that probably have ever happened in a very, very, very long time. And to do that, you need information and you need knowledge, and you need to go, oh, this is a one moment. I need to be vulnerable and authentic. It's uncomfortable, but I need to be vulnerable and authentic. Oh, this is a number 6 moment. I need to be still. I need to be quiet. I need to go within. I need to be the hermit. That you need to recognize the moments as they're showing up. And that's why I put up the numerology and the astrology for the day every day, because it gives people a little bit of a roadmap as to what to expect and how to work with that particular number at that time. And you're more than welcome. It's on my Facebook pages. It's all over the place. It's on my blogs. I mean, all this stuff is out there for free. So please use it and utilize it, because I think, I'm at this point in my life that it's really about getting information to people so that they can make a difference, because they have shifted and they have changed and their energy is different, so that then they can have an impact in the world that is very important and very positive. All right. So there you go with the number 1. Thanks for listening.